Behold, my glorious supporter EyePatchNotes has done something unforgivable and trapped me in a 26 episode fantasy battle anime where I need to go from Mook to Mao, as you said, and decide where I'm going to be in the villain hierarchy. Let me elaborate. EyePatchNotes says, as part of the summer 2021 lineup, you find yourself stuck in a 26 episode fantasy battle anime. Will horrors never cease? Just kill me now. You are part of the antagonistic faction, though your buildcraft and genre savviness carry over to any position in their ranks from Mook to Mao. For people that don't get that, I just find that a funny phrase. Mook implies like a grunt, a basic soldier in the evil army or whatever, and Mao means demon lord in Japanese. In other words, the leader. What narrative roles do you fill and or resonate with in the antagonistic faction? For the purposes of this parlay, defining your exact abilities is optional. I'm obviously going to, though. Allegiances can be changed mid-season, though you must initially seek to harm the protagonist. If necessary, assume actually evil rather than well-intentioned extremist. There's been a lot of these immoral parlays so far. So what's going on with that little last part is I'm in the antagonistic faction, but a lot of the time, there's somebody in that antagonistic faction that is not morally evil per se, like alignment chart, letter of the law evil necessarily. They might just be, they have an extreme view and they intend to use the situation to do something good. They're maybe taking advantage of the situation, right? A very good example of this that comes to mind, or what I think a good example of a well-intentioned extremist is Suzaku from Code Geass. In my mind, Lelouch is doing something that I can't call evil, but Suzaku is doing something that is morally wrong, period. But he wants a good outcome. He's just doing something that it's wrong. End of discussion. This is a wrong thing to do. You are supporting a dictator, period. However, his intentions are ultimately good. I don't think that Suzaku is evil, but what he's doing is wrong. I think pretty unambiguously. I'm not saying Lelouch doesn't do some things that are wrong too. I just think Suzaku is a good example of this. A character that undeniably wants a good outcome, but is doing something bad, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it being bad, in the pursuit of getting that good outcome, and is maybe a little lying to themselves about the outcome actually being good. Anyway, so the idea here is, I don't get to be that. I'm just gonna say I'm not gonna be that. I have to be actually evil. My goal has to be like something actually bad, period. Okay. And EyePatch, you also, there's a lot of materials for this one, which is kind of fun. There's some example roles, just to give us some examples, this is the best part. So examples of who I can be in this antagonistic faction, and just to get the juices flowing. The final boss, okay, last boss, one of the four generals, therefore there are always four generals. One of the four generals, sexy in parentheses, okay. Sympathetic recurring rival, okay, and enemy soldier A, deceased in parentheses. Okay, we can be dead, for example. The immediate thing that came to mind when you wrote one of the four generals is Kill La Kill, and the four student council people, which I love personally. So one of my favorite examples of the four generals trope. They're characters of their own. They have their own agency. I unfortunately don't remember all of their names off the top of my head, but like Sanagayama always sticks in my mind. He's the kendo club guy, and so he is a sort of bushido warrior type dude and doesn't feel the way that Satsuki feels, where she wants we get the job done, period. He wants like a fair fight, ultimately a fair fight, and to win honorably. And he has that whole arc with his headband. I won't talk about it more than that to avoid spoilers. But people who've watched the show, you know what I mean. People who don't, you won't know what I mean. Yeah, anyway, that's cool. So I like that. Yeah, so to do this, you said, which narrative roles do I fill or resonate with? So if I have to be actually evil, and the question is which role in the antagonistic faction do I fill or resonate with? I spent 5 minutes and we're now answering the question. There we go. Welcome to Parley. I need to figure out what the most evil thing I think is. So I can what if I am actually evil? What? Why? What? You know, it's still me, but there's an. I don't think I'm evil. I don't know. What is the most evil thing I think? Let's just hide under the table for a minute there. Um, I don't know. What are evil? What are evil motivations? I think that's a way to start. Like, what are some evil things? It's very popular in anime for evil to be society and for the good guys to be rebels. So that's a little troublesome. I'm not sure. I've always thought that that was a little problematic, but what are you gonna do? Let me see. What else is a good example of evil? Um, I think a little bit of a faction like I haven't read the manga for that time I reincarnated as a slime, but I've been watching the anime, and Clayman, where I am in the anime, is essentially a character who runs a country. So he's a leader of a country, and in slime isekai, we know a lot of people who are leaders of a country, and Clayman is evil in a nutshell because he's willing to go too far to get power. He wants power, and he's okay with trampling on people's lives to get it. Pretty standard kind of evil. However, he's not a straightforward dictator in that he is willing to. He's not just going to kill everyone or trample on everyone. There's a feeling of wanting to manipulate. Again, we don't really know that much about this person where I am in that anime, so I'm just positing. And this is only to get ideas flowing anyway. So how about we say that I'm part of that faction? I To be honest with you, and let's be nice in the comments, folks. I'm gonna admit something kind of nasty about myself. I am probably willing to do some bad things if I feel like the at the end of the day, I care a lot about my life ultimately being in its final form. This isn't even my final form lifestyle. So if I am convinced that push comes to shove, I am not going to get this thing that I feel is a huge component of me having a fulfilling life. I'm not going to get that, period, if that is ever apparent to me, which it rarely is in normal life. I am willing to do some relatively immoral things to make it happen. Or at the very least, I'm just admitting to you, I often think dark thoughts about getting that thing to occur. Now, again, in normal life, we rarely have an experience where we think, oh, I know for sure, my bucket list contains, like having a fulfilling relationship with this specific person, and push comes to shove, I am not going to unless I do this extreme thing. Again, please don't put this on me too much. I'm just giving you an example, but imagine, and this is a trope, the if I can't have her, nobody can thing, which is terrible. That's evil. That is not what I relate to. But in other parts of my life, I have definitely felt that way. For example, I'll just give you another example. Again, this is not from me. I'm just giving you examples. Please don't accuse me of doing these things. I'm just admitting that I have a streak like this. I don't act on it very much. That's why I don't think I'm evil. But we're imagining that I do act on it. I'm the kind of person who might say, I don't enjoy, a 9 to 5 job, so I will break the law and steal and lie to somehow get a successful YouTube channel. Now, again, this is a safe one because, as you know, I didn't do that. If you're familiar with my YouTube channel, I did something quite legitimate and actually very arduous and blood, sweat, and tearsy to I stayed up all night playing The War Within, and then I made a tutorial about Riven mods, but everybody else was asleep, so it got a million gajillion views, and that was what launched my channel. It was not fun, but I did it. It wasn't good either, but I did do it. But I could totally imagine myself doing that. I can imagine myself saying, other people will be inconvenienced, but it's not as important as me getting this thing and like having my life not be completely pointless. That is something that a dark version of me might do. I hope it. I'm not going to lose all my subscribers after having admitted that. So there you go. So that's what it's going to be. What position in the evil faction does that correspond to? Who would do such a thing? To me, this says 4 generals kind of thing. This says lieutenant. not leader, because often the leaders have the thing about something being popular is that it has to be kind of stupid. I don't mean like bad necessarily, but it has to be something that is basic enough, not complicated enough, that a majority of people it has a lowest common denominator effect, right? You can't have a particularly good motive. There's only so good your motivation can be if it's going to appeal to a lot of people. Let's say it that way. You can see this on YouTube. There's there's a phenomenon that's fascinating where there's kind of a cap on how morally positive or like net positive effect a YouTube channel can have and still get a lot of subscribers and views. In my mind, it's like CGP Grey and Kurzgesagt are the channel. I feel like that's like the ceiling of this is the most good you can be and have people who are largely bad, in my opinion, actually like listening to what you have to say. They're in my mind some of the most successful channels that have a net positive effect, but are still generally applicable enough because they talk about the most general topics imaginable, quite intentionally, so that they can be broadly accessible, even though they're saying something actually kind of specific. I think Gray and the Kurzgesagt channel have a fairly specific message. They have stated their worldviews, and they are not general worldviews. They are pretty specific worldviews that are great. I really admire that. And so the trick is that they're covering topics that are so broad that surely they can still reach a fairly large audience, right? So anyway, but when you are the leader of an antagonistic faction, I think that means that you have a pretty basic platform. You are spiteful, revenge. The world has pushed us down, and we gotta bully them as well. I guess I don't know. It's usually pretty stupid. Or the Clayman example. I just have a lot of resources and/or power. Follow me if you want to be on the winning team. Again, I don't know if that's actually how that character is in that specific show. I'm just giving you an example. I am not like that, but I am a person who has a strong, structured motivation. And to me, usually the trope is that the final boss or the Mao or the leader, they have a very singular, pretty simple, you can summarize it pretty quickly, motivation. And of the characters in a show like this, generally it's the people right below that have the most complicated motivations. They usually want the most specific things. They basically usually they have an extreme enough desire or an evil enough desire that they need to go far out of their way and join this evil faction to get it. But it's specific enough that they're able to negotiate. It's not the same goal as the leader, but it's compatible enough that they'll participate with the leader, but separate enough that they have their own plot agency. And I think that's where these characters are the best. They do not necessarily immediately follow orders, but they don't need to be kicked out to do the thing. I'm not going to declare myself to be one of the four generals sexy. It made me laugh a lot that you included that. I am not that self-confident a person, but I want to acknowledge that one and then move along. One of the four generals. So what's it actually going to do? So it's 26 episodes. Oh boy, we got a long one ahead of us. I thought to myself when I started answering this, how fast can I answer this question? And I thought, this is going to be like a half hour long. I don't. We'll see. We'll see. We set up pretty much everything now. So, yeah. I mean, I think to me, what I resonate with is the sort of Tartaglia in Genshin Impact or Sanagayama in Kill la Kill attitude, where along the way, having the ability to apply your power against a worthy foe is pleasant, all things being equal. If I have the abilities, I would much rather get to use them in a setting that I enjoyed than not. And so being part of the antagonistic faction has the pleasant side effect then of pitting me against worthy opponents. That sounds fun. I like that idea. I like competition as well. I think the difference is that I do not care the slightest bit about chivalry or honor in combat. That's for nerds. No, there is no such thing. All's fair in love and war. except that saying all's fair in love is a scummy thing to do. War though, come on. And in a world with magic, there isn't even such thing in my mind as violating a sort of magical Geneva Convention, because magic allows you to have a sort of upping of the stakes. And so I guess here's my evil motivation. I said I want my life to be a certain way, willing to do evil things to get it. I am part of this evil faction because as one of these four general characters, because I want to take part in a sort of a large magical conflict to metagame the magical situation in the world and progress it to the point that I cannot be overcome. I will have had so much experience fighting people that are trying to one up each other and desperately fighting to achieve or stop a certain event from happening. The Mao, the final boss, and the protagonist or whatever. I will experience that so firsthand, right there, taking notes about my magical experiences, that I will be able to develop countermeasures against pretty much anything. An ability that I've historically liked a lot is the ability to see the structure of a magical effect so that you can then deconstruct it. Imagine you've got your ball of energy or your source of energy that you have, whatever it is in whatever world, and then you use magic, some incantation or some practice, a magic circle, whatever, to structure it, to create a little scaffold, to hold the energy, shape it in a certain way, and then direct it. This is how electricity works a lot of the time. And if you can see the structure around the magic, then you can pluck, and then it all falls apart. However, this probably requires an absolutely ridiculous amount of experience looking at people doing different things to effectively universalize how you would deconstruct such a thing. And so I want that experience. Basically, I want to turn myself into the ultimate magic counter magic weapon. And we all know there's nothing more evil than counter magic in Magic the Gathering. I want to gain the all-powerful, purely evil ability to delete magic in a world with magic. Nothing could be more evil. But what it means is that if necessary, I now have a silver bullet to counter any magical ability. And if it gets out, that would spell the end for this world as a magical place. Imagine that I discover partway through the season that this technique is actually pretty easy to perform if you know the trick, and then I end up defecting from the Mao faction, not because I'm not evil anymore, but because I realize that at all costs, I need to make sure I do not give this ability away. I was worried, perhaps, about losing out on some opportunity in my life and not having things just so the way that I want them. But now that I have this technique, that's a non-issue. I am now basically unstoppable as long as nobody else finds out what it is. So now anybody who sees this, they must die. They have to go. And so rather than continuing to force myself to kill people that see this thing, it's just easier for my selfish desires to completely abandon my faction and go off on my merry way. However, perhaps the protagonist knows that I have this ability, and being that they are pure of heart or trustworthy or have mental plot armor or whatever, they're not going to use this in some negative way. And to the audience, it's apparent in the narrative that if the protagonist knew this counter magic ability, it would solve the situation right there. And the end of my little subplot, because I'm only one of the four generals and it's a 26 episode show, the end of my little subplot will be that it becomes clear to me, after being chased by the protagonist for long enough, that I should tell them how to do this counter magic thing, but I don't. And if past shows are any indication, they probably kill me. Probably we fight and I die. Rip. But yeah, that sounds fun. I'd enjoy this show. I had an ability that I really like, a sort of ethos, a way of organizing powers for characters that I really like, is the one that Kinoko Nasu, the writer of the Fate series, uses, which is called Origins. The idea is that each character has a single underlying trait that shapes who they are, and that everything they do kind of comes back to that core. I call these keystone traits. What I don't like about the way Nasu thinks about them is that the person basically is that thing and they sort of just can't deny that thing. I don't think people are like this. But what I think is true is that if you look at a person's personality, they can change small things. But depending on where that personality aspect is in their sort of little arch bridge of themselves, if it's closer to the center, you can't remove that thing as easily without doing some demolition to the bridge that is who they are, the thing that takes them into the real world. So if you remove this keystone thing, you can do it, but you need to build an entirely new bridge. You can't just haphazardly stop being that way, right? And I think it's really interesting as a sort of mental exercise to think about what this keystone thing is for you. For me, it is universalizing. It's turning a thing into a general thing, not oversimplifying. I mean, I guess kind of oversimplifying. It means rather than saying a specific thing, I would rather find a more, not more moderate necessarily, not more general necessarily, not more widely applicable necessarily, not more or less committal necessarily, but some combination of things like that. I want to know a system, a mechanism behind the thing. That's a better way to say it. And so this idea where you can sort of understand the way people construct magic well enough that eventually you're able to deconstruct it and pull at the framework itself, rather than you could do this in a simple way. In Full Metal Alchemist, if people need to use transmutation circles, it doesn't make much sense to try to fight them. You should destroy their transmutation circle. It doesn't, that's the weakest link, right? The same way, rather than stopping the energy in the magic that's coming at you, it's better to just remove the framework and then the magic disperses. Have the framework. Wonder where that came from. Anyway, so the universalizing idea applied to something like the way Nasu does it in the Fate franchise means that my abilities are going to revolve around universalizing. And to me, one of the interesting ways to interpret that is being able to translate qualities I have into other qualities, making my abilities universalizable or exchangeable, you might say. So if I'm a certain amount of fast and a certain amount of strong, I can universalize that certain amount of strength that I have into being more speed instead. I can just exchange them. It's all the same at the end of the day. At the end of the day, these are all just qualities I have. They're stats, basically. It converts abilities into stats that can be redistributed as much as you want. You remember how often I say, I wish you could just respec all the time. I say that about lots of things. This is where that comes from, is that a really powerful ability would be, in any world, you don't need any power or anything, just whatever abilities you have, you can respec, is a very, very, whenever you want, is a very, very powerful ability. And I think it would be fun to have a character where their entire thing is just, they can redo the build craft of who they are. Physically. Mentally, that's ridiculous, but because you can undo your own ability. But physically being able to build craft yourself again and again is, of course, the ability that you said my build craft and genre savviness have to carry over. So there you go. That must be what my ability is. I can build craft myself, or see the build craft that makes another ability tick, right? Why did I start talking about that? Okay, anyway, thanks for asking. It was fun. I completely lost. I don't know why I thought I should add that in because we didn't talk about abilities that much. And saying just counterspelling, I mean, that's just boring. Come on. For my pleasure, I would not play a mono blue deck in Magic the Gathering, and nor am I going to leave you with, I defined an ability I have, but the only one was the counterspell. Absolutely not. You won't get that from me. Anyway, thanks for asking. It was a fun question. I'm sure I had some reason I brought that up.